obviously we need additional resources, but what are your thoughts of managing this just unconscionable workload for the immigration courts?
Thank you, Congresswoman, for raising that important issue. Certainly, with respect to the workload of the Executive Office for Immigration Review, their workload has increased significantly over the past several years due to the influx of those seeking to enter our country. We saw this problem begin several years ago. As you have noted, the backlog of more than 2 or 3 years is something that we have been noting, and certainly back in 2014, EOR decided to try and handle this matter by prioritizing certain types of cases and trying to work through that backlog, particularly along our southwest border. You mentioned Los Angeles, you mentioned Phoenix, although Chicago reflects an influx of individuals who've chosen to move further north. But particularly along our southwest border, we've been trying to work on those backlogs. The additional resources we have with the assistance of Congress, and I thank the members of this committee and other members for their support, we have been able to add additional resources to the immigration courts. We have, as far as 2016, hired 36 new immigration judges. We hired 20 new judges in 2015, and we have another approximately 100 judges going through the hiring process now. It is our hope that this will assist us in not only handling the priority issues, but dealing with the backlog that often results from the other areas that we have to pull resources from. We are always looking for ways to make the system more efficient, to make the system deal with the important issues raised in immigration courts, to protect our borders, as well as to provide due process to those who are in immigration court.
I thank you, General. I would just like to note, Mr. Chairman, that our colleague Sheila Jackson Lee is not here because she is attending the memorial in Dallas, and I wanted to make sure that members knew that. It's not for lack of interest, but because of that obligation. I thank you, General Lynch, for your testimony, and I yield back.
Chair thanks the gentlewoman and recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Issa, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. General Lynch, you and I work together on a myriad of issues, and I have great respect for many parts of the work you do and the way you do it. So I'm going to take a tack that maybe is more appropriate to my own district and to the men and women there who are asking certain questions. And I'll run you through some quick questions, and it's really for them to understand. You're obviously a skilled attorney. You took an oath. You're under a penalty of perjury as you speak today. You prepared for today so that you'd be able to answer some of the critical questions, including, obviously, the ones you've been asked so far. Is that correct?
I try and be responsive to the committee's questions, and I appreciate the information that staffers provide about what's of interest to the committee so that we can have the information for you.
So in that preparation, and you've got my old friend Peter Kazik behind you, you prepared to answer questions more or less in about 4 ways. Yes, no, I don't know, or I can't answer, or in some cases some combination of that. That's pretty much how you answer here, is affirmatively yes, affirmatively no, or these shades of gray in between, correct?
Congressman, I'm not going to go into the internal discussions.
No, I'm not asking for the internal, but the character of questions.
My responses in that way.
So, so far today, you have rarely said absolutely yes or absolutely no, correct? You've mostly talked in terms of I can't answer that, or it's not appropriate, or see the FBI director. And so in light of that, and this is really a question of what do I tell the Marines, the sailors, Army personnel in my district, the veterans, the contractors, all those who work for the government with classified information. The former Secretary of State, in an unambiguous way, said repeatedly, both under oath and to the public, time and time again, I did not send or receive any information marked classified. And you're aware of that she had definitively said this repeatedly, right?
I believe her statements are on the record, and I defer you to that.
And I have referred to that. She unambiguously said something which was not true, according to the FBI director. So when you send and receive documents that are marked classified clearly, and according to her statement, 300 people have seen her email. Some portion of those people saw the ones that said secret, top secret, confidential, whatever. None of them are charged. What do I say to the tens of thousands of people that live and work in my district, that work for the federal government, including more than 47,000 Marines? What do I say when, in fact, saying something that isn't true, handling classified information in an extremely careless way, has no criminal ramifications? What do I say to them? How do I reconcile the fact that they know that their friends and colleagues have been prosecuted or fired for doing less in the past?
Congressman, I can't speak to any cases you may be referring to involving friends or colleagues. Again, I would refer you to the description that
I appreciate
provided
that,
about
Madam General, but
I've got to
ask you a
that
question.
follow this similar fact pattern. That is what I think we focus on.
Okay, let me go through.
Every case is different.
Every case is different.
Has to be handled in the same way. Every individual, whether they are former secretary,
so there will be
else,
some cases
has to be reviewed.
Madam General, I have
with
very
the
limited
facts
time.
And the law there.
General Lynch, you keep mentioning this professional team of career professionals. Were there any political appointees on that team? Any people who, in fact, did not work for the State Department or did not work for the U.S. Attorney's Office prior to President Obama coming into office?
Well, again, with respect to the team, typically we don't go into the composition of it. It was led by our National Security Division, and everyone on the team was a career individual. Again,
I'll ask the question with specificity. I'm not asking for names. Was there at least one person who was politically appointed that was on that team?
The investigative team was composed of career prosecutors and seasoned agents.
The question is, was there at least one that did not work a career, that was in fact an appointee, either confirmed or unconfirmed?
Congressman, I've replied to you as to the composition of the team, that all of them.
So your answer is no, there were no political appointees.
All of them were career lawyers as well as seasoned investigators.
Okay. I'll take that as a no, because that's the only way I can interpret what you keep repeating. So, last but not least, the American people are told that these documents were not a crime to carelessly deal with. Should I find a way to make sure that those thousands of documents are made public so the American people can evaluate just how insignificant they are, or how President Obama said there's classified and then there's classified? Are these documents that could be easily made available to the public, or are they too sensitive to be made to the public today?
Congressman, you may take the appropriate steps in terms of reviewing anything, and you may make requests for that, and we'll work to accommodate you with respect to that. I don't have an answer for you beyond that.
So you couldn't today. You could not characterize whether any or all of those documents would have to be retained privately because they're too sensitive to be made public.
The time of the gentleman has expired. The witness will be permitted to answer the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With respect to the handling of any of the documents or emails in this matter, because they involve another agency, we would have to work with the other agency. We always work with the agency that is termed the owner of information. So on behalf of the Department of Justice, I would not be able to give you an answer at this time as to those documents, because it would involve other agencies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Chair thanks the gentleman. Recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Cohen, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Attorney General Lynch, when you appeared last time before this committee, I brought up the case of Darius Stewart. Darius Stewart was a young man, 19 years old, who was shot to death by a Memphis police officer. He was a passenger in a car. The officer stopped the car for a headlight violation and ran a check on the passenger, ended up getting in the back seat. The officer shot him, killed him. Our local prosecutor asked the grand jury to indict for manslaughter, but the grand jury didn't for some reason. I asked the Department of Justice to investigate, and I'm grateful for that. We are eager to know the results of your investigation. We need to know if there are any civil rights violations. Can you please tell us when we might expect any results in that case? I read today in the Times about the Garner case. I know it's difficult, but this case is one that's in Memphis with Darius Stewart.
Yes, thank you for raising this important issue. The matter is still under review, so I'm not able to give you either a result or a timetable at this time, but of course we will work to keep you informed.
Thank you very much. Last week we saw more disturbing videos of police shooting of African Americans. And we saw police officers killed in Dallas, and that was dreadful. The other side has made a point, my friends, to say people should know that nobody's above the law and all people are treated equally. Unfortunately, what we've seen is that African Americans are not treated equally when it comes to deadly force and police officers in this country. And that's a more chilling reality than anything else that's been brought up here today. People's lives have been taken. This is a great problem. Black lives matter. Congressman Lacy Clay and I put forward a bill last year, the Police Training and Independent Review Act, H.R. 2302, to address two of the major issues that we have been identified as necessary to help improve the relationship of police and citizens. The bill would withhold a portion of federal funding unless police are trained on a range of important issues like racial and ethnic bias and cultural diversity. I know the DOJ recently announced it will train all its office agents to recognize implicit bias, so I know you're aware of the need of training. Our bill would also withhold a portion of federal funding unless police shootings that result in a death or injury are investigated and, if necessary, prosecuted independently. Asking a local prosecutor to investigate the same law enforcement agency they work with and to provide them with witnesses is implicitly wrong. Like Caesar's wife, an individual should be a prosecutor beyond the appearance of impropriety. If a prosecutor does everything right, the action can still appear biased. If we're serious about restoring the sense of trust that we need to have with our citizenry, we need to eliminate this conflict of interest. As I know, as you've mentioned, a key part of President Obama's task force on 21st century policing calls for independent prosecutors. Campaign Zero, gaining a lot of credibility, also has called for the passage of this act. Congressman Clay and I have seen a surge of support. We now have 77 co-sponsors. Has been endorsed by as unlikely a team maybe as the NAACP and the Chicago Tribune. Do you think that additional training for police and the use of independent prosecutors would help reduce violence between police and civilians and help restore a sense of trust in law enforcement?
Well, thank you for raising this important issue, Congressman. I think that the issue of the training that we at the Department of Justice provide for law enforcement, as well as the training generated in the field, is of utmost importance. I will tell you that as I have, in fact, traveled the country on my community policing tour, highlighting departments that are working on this very issue, I've seen some outstanding examples, in particular of de-escalation training, using various scenarios to start literally with the mindset of the officer and how they respond to certain situations. I've also been extremely encouraged by seeing law enforcement comment on many of the recent incidents that have been captured on video and talk about how training would or would not relate to those specific incidents. And I've been incredibly heartened by the growing sense of importance this issue has taken on within law enforcement itself. We have seen a number of, as I mentioned, of very, very positive programs involving training. We've seen, as I mentioned, not just the de-escalation, but also training in the issues about the definitions of excessive force, the legal standards for excessive force. I've seen programs that break that down for officers, where we have seen results in those communities.
So do you think training is something additional training would be important?
It is key.
And would independent prosecutors be a good thing?
I believe it depends upon the nature of the office that would be looking into the matter. I believe that you would need individuals who have experience in dealing with complicated cases, who have experience in dealing with forensic evidence, and certainly you'd want those offices, wherever they be located, to have that kind of expertise at their hands as well.
And let me close, Mr. Chairman, with one other fact. I don't know if you're aware, but in Memphis, a group, partially Black Lives Matter, had a protest march on Sunday. They interfered with traffic, made their demonstration on I-40 at the Hernando de Soto Bridge crossing the river. Our interim police director, Rawlings, marched arm in arm with them, saw to it that there was no violence, no arrests, no shootings, no use of force. He showed a kind of policing we need in this country where both the protesters and all the citizenry and the police saw this man as a leader, a hero, and somebody who kept the calm and the peace in Memphis, Tennessee.
Time of the gentleman has expired, but the witness will be permitted to respond if she chooses to do so.
Just to acknowledge, indeed, the strong leadership of the Memphis police chief, which I've seen replicated in departments across the country, including particularly in Dallas.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Forbes, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Madam Attorney General, thank you for being here today and for responding to our questions. Madam Attorney General, when Director Comey was here, he was very forthcoming and candid in answering his questions with specificity about Secretary Clinton, and he did not refuse to answer any of those questions based on the fact that there was some legal prohibition that kept him from doing it. Today, you have indicated several times that you wouldn't respond to some of those questions with specificity. Is there any legal prohibition that you have that Director Comey did not have that prohibits you from answering those questions with some degree of specificity?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to that, Congressman. I think it's important to note that the Director and I had very different roles in this investigation and therefore very different amounts of information about this investigation. I am speaking about the information that I received, which again, as I've noted, was the team recommendation. Director Comey was speaking from his position as someone who was more directly involved in the investigation.
I understand that you may have different information. My question, though, is are there any legal prohibitions on you that Director Comey did not have?
Well, as I've indicated, it would not be appropriate in my role to discuss the specific facts and the law.
Is the legal prohibition against that other than the fact that you just don't have the same knowledge about the case that Director Comey had?
We typically actually do not provide the level of detail that Director Comey did. He chose to provide that level of information and detail.
Or is that just a choice that you make in not disclosing that information?
Well, as indicated, we obviously are not allowed to discuss certain types of information, for example, grand jury information in any matter.
We're not talking about grand jury information here, are we? What I want to know is, tell me, is there a legal reason that prohibits you from giving us information, or is that just a choice you have made?
Congressman, as I've indicated, the Director and I had very different roles in this investigation. So his level of detail is significantly different from mine, and I would not be able to provide you with that same level of detail.
Because you don't have the information, not because there's a legal prohibition.
In addition to that, in part of my role as Attorney General, I would not be going into these discussions typically. We have taken the step of providing more information on this matter than in others.
I just need to know if there's a legal prohibition that prohibits you from disclosing information to this committee, or is that a choice you have made?
It would depend upon the nature of the information.
Questions
Certainly
that you've been
there would
asked
be.
that you've had, is there any legal prohibition that would prohibit you from giving the same information that Director Comey has given?
Well, with respect to the source of that information, if it came from the grand jury, that would be a legal prohibition. With respect to opinions
let the record say
about
that
the matter
there
of
is no
law,
legal
that's a different issue.
prohibition that can be cited here. On June 27th, the Supreme Court of the United States gave your department a rather stellar rebuke in your prosecution of Governor Bob McDonnell. Having looked at that and the basis that your department launched everything you had against a Republican governor who everyone agreed had violated no state law. They took a federal law, and you had cited, looking at statute, relevant case law, and history. There was no relevant case law to suggest that setting up a meeting constituted a crime, no history, statutory history that suggested it was a crime, and yet your department put everything it had in prosecuting that governor. Having looked at what the Supreme Court has now said, do you believe that prosecution was a mistake?
Certainly, I believe that the prosecutors who worked on that matter investigated it, presented it to a grand jury, and received an indictment. We, of course, have, as presented in our papers before the Supreme Court,
a choice which you have not made in Secretary Clinton's case. It would be, can you tell us now, looking at that and the way you interpreted that statute, was that a mistake?
Congressman, with respect to the investigation of the former governor of Virginia, I don't have a comment on that. We have accepted the results of the Supreme Court,
not because you don't have a legal prohibition,
and will, of course, be reviewing the case in the light of that.
Then my final question, then, as time is running out, is when you look at a governor of Virginia that you launched everything this department had against to destroy him and to prosecute him, can you tell me the federal nexus you had in that case and compare that to the federal nexus against Secretary Clinton in national security of this country, which you refused to bring to a grand jury or for indictment to see if, in fact, one is justified?
Congressman, I don't have a comment on the McDonald case except to refer you to the pleadings in that
Can you
for a
compare the
discussion of the
federal
law
nexus
there.
between the two cases for us, please?
Congressman, I don't have a comparison between those two cases for you.
And that's rather disappointing because the national security of the country is rather important to the country. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Chair thanks the gentleman. Recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Attorney General Lynch, for being here today. And I think Americans see the duplicitousness of the arguments that have been made by Republicans here on this panel. First, they question you about why you did not recuse yourself from the Hillary Clinton email investigation decision not to prosecute. And then on the other hand, they criticize you for relying upon the recommendation, the unanimous recommendation of career, professional investigators and prosecutors at both the FBI and the Department of Justice, who made the decision and then recommended to.
I'm going to stop you right there. I just have to, while he's really puffing her up right now, I just want to point out the fact that you as an American, if you see what we see in the case and see the double talk that she's been given this entire time, and the fact that she has avoided the questionings, she has tried to talk around them or even talk over certain people that were speaking at this panel, showing no respect to the panel and yet showing total disrespect. Why is it that Ms. Lynch believes that Hillary Clinton is allowed to be shown favoritism? Well, who's on the panel? A question that was a valid point. Was anyone pointed to that panel? Yes or no question. She avoided it. So don't you think that we, as Americans, have the right to know what was actually on those panels, what was actually in Hillary Clinton's emails, if they were not a national threat and it was something to be able to speak to her husband, Hillary Clinton's husband, with Ms. Lynch and Mr. President Bill Clinton having a conversation about grandchildren. If it wasn't that detrimental, why has it not been made public to us? Why is this redacted and it's had some things held back for top secret, for emails that were too sensitive for the American people to be able to handle? But yet you see the double talk. You see the Republicans coming after like a bulldog. You see the Democrats tiptoeing around because they don't want to offend anybody in their party. This is something that we're never going to get the answers to. I don't understand how she could still be the Attorney General. How she could be allowed to be the Attorney General. How she could not have separated herself from the case because she met with someone that was a part of the case that was actually who they were going after. And then shortly after that meeting, 2-3 days later, the FBI decided not to prosecute Hillary Clinton. There is a double standard, people, and we're not being listened to anymore. America, we're not free. These people are tyrants. These people are dictators. These people are above the law. You are not. You will be subject to follow the laws that they implement, but they themselves do not have to follow. You, the American citizen, pay your taxes, and you go and vote for people that don't respect you, honor you, or even stand for the ideals that you have. It is an illusion, and it's hard for me to say that. It's very difficult for me to say that because I believe in the American dream. I believe in what America was supposed to stand for. But this is not the America that we or our grandparents or their parents or great-grandparents thought America would be. This is not even America that our founding fathers fought for. And that's a shame. People's lives were lost in Benghazi. Nothing happened to the one that would refuse to act. Secret information was sent out on private servers that anyone could look at, even our enemies of our country could obtain. And yet, nothing was done. Lied under oath. Had perjury against them. Again, nothing is done. Instead, you have the Attorney General defending this decision because she knows where her bread is buttered, as they used to say. She sits there with a double talk and a double standard. All lives matter, not just black lives, but all lives matter. Even the soldiers that lost their lives in Benghazi. Why are there not people standing up saying enough is enough with this hypocrisy? I'm not asking you to go riot in the streets. I'm not asking you to sit there and protest in the streets. I'm asking you to get on the phone and call your congressman and congresswoman and to make them do what we elected them to do and hold them to that standard. If they use our tax dollars that we work hard for and that we work towards, that means they work for us, not us for them. This is America, where it was supposed to be the land of the brave and the free. Where are you, free people? Get on the phones. Talk to your representatives. And make them do their jobs. And anyone that thinks they're above the law, or anyone that sits there and treats people above the law, get them out of the jobs and the leadership roles that they have and put them on the streets. But don't riot, don't protest, and don't cause martial law. Just pick up your phone and call your representatives and tell them you are a concerned citizen of the United States, and it's high time that you, my representative, represent my ideals. Please pay attention to your surroundings. You never know what lies around the corner.